Let me show you my favorite raspberry buttercream. It's fluffy, naturally pink, and made with real raspberries. No artificial flavoring. I love this frosting because it instantly makes cakes, and cupcakes feel a little more special, but it's actually very simple to make. So if you have a few minutes, I'll show you how I make a quick raspberry puree and turn it into a smooth, creamy buttercream. First, you'll see me starting the raspberry puree. I add 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar, 2 tablespoons of water, and 1 cup of fresh raspberries right into a small saucepan. I don't wait for anything to dissolve. Everything goes in one after another. Then, I place the pan over medium heat and bring the mixture to a gentle simmer. I let it simmer for about 5 to 8 minutes, stirring occasionally. As it cooks, the raspberries begin to break down and release their juices. After a few minutes, the berries soften, the color turns beautifully bright red, and the kitchen starts smelling amazing. Sweet, slightly tart, and very berry-like. If the raspberries taste a little tart, you can add an additional 1 to 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar. I usually taste the mixture first and then decide. Sometimes raspberries are naturally sweet and don't need much help, and sometimes they're a little dramatic and need some sugar to calm down. Another optional ingredient here is 1 teaspoon of lemon juice. Lemon juice brightens the flavor and really brings out that fresh berry taste. I personally love adding it because it gives the puree a slightly brighter flavor, especially if the berries are very sweet. At this stage, the puree still contains all the raspberry seeds, which is completely normal. Raspberries are tiny, but they come with a lot of seeds. To remove the seeds, I pour the puree through a fine mesh sieve. I use a silicone spatula to gently press the puree through the sieve. This takes a little patience, but it makes a big difference in the final buttercream. Removing the seeds creates a much smoother frosting texture. Little tip from me: don't rush this step. If you press slowly and scrape the bottom of the sieve, you'll get much more puree out of the berries. Once finished, what you're left with is a silky raspberry puree that's full of natural flavor and color. Then I set the puree aside and allow it to cool completely. And this step is really important. If the puree is warm, when you add it to the butter, it can melt the butter and your frosting will become too soft. So I usually just let it sit on the counter while I get everything else ready. Now I'm moving on to the buttercream. I'm using the bowl of my stand mixer, and the first thing I add is 1 cup of unsalted butter, softened to room temperature. I start by beating the butter on high speed for about 3 minutes until it becomes smooth, creamy, and a little lighter in color. This step is always satisfying to watch. Butter goes from looking a little dense to suddenly fluffy and soft. Once the butter looks nice and fluffy, I add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract and about 1/3 cup of the raspberry puree we just made. I mix those together on low speed just until everything comes together. At this point, the color starts turning this beautiful natural pink, which I always love seeing. Quick tip for me here: make sure the raspberry puree is completely cool before adding it. If it's still warm, it can soften the butter too much, and the buttercream can become a little loose. I've learned that lesson the hard way before. As the mixer keeps running, everything blends together into a smooth, creamy mixture, and the raspberry color really starts to come through. Now, I start adding the powdered sugar. First, I add a small pinch of salt. For this buttercream, I use about 3.5 to 4 cups of powdered sugar, but I never add it all at once. Instead, I add about 1/2 cup at a time, letting the mixer run between each addition. This keeps the buttercream smooth and also prevents that big cloud of powdered sugar that can happen if everything goes in at once. If you've baked before, you probably know exactly what I mean. So I add 1/2 cup, let it mix in, scrape the bowl if needed, and then add the next 1/2 cup. It takes a little longer this way, but the buttercream becomes much smoother and creamier in the end. Once all the powdered sugar is mixed in, I turn the mixer up to high speed and let it run for about 8 minutes. This is the part where the buttercream really transforms. As it whips, you'll see it becoming lighter, fluffier, and much smoother. I always find this step a little satisfying to watch. It goes from a thick frosting to something that looks soft and almost cloud-like. If the buttercream ever feels a little too soft, I just add a bit more powdered sugar. And if it gets too thick, a small spoon of raspberry puree loosens it right up. Buttercream is actually pretty forgiving, which is one of the reasons I like working with it. And it's also why I sometimes sneak a little taste while the mixer is running. When the buttercream is ready, it should be smooth, fluffy, and easy to spread or pipe. This frosting is wonderful for cakes, cupcakes, macarons, sandwich cookies, or honestly even spread on graham crackers if you're feeling a little snacky in the kitchen. I'm not saying I've done that, but I'm also not saying I haven't. Before we finish, let me share a few little tips I've learned along the way. These are the kinds of things you usually figure out after making buttercream a few times, or after making a small mess in the kitchen. First, a quick baker mistake that happens all the time. Adding warm puree. If the raspberry puree is even slightly warm, it can soften the butter too much, and the buttercream might look a little loose or separated. If that ever happens, don't panic. I usually just pop the bowl into the refrigerator for about 10 to 15 minutes and then whip it again. Most of the time, it comes right back together like nothing happened. Because fruit puree adds moisture, fruit buttercream can sometimes be a little softer than classic vanilla buttercream. If I need it a bit firmer for decorating, I simply add a little more powdered sugar, just a few tablespoons at a time, until the texture feels right. Another easy trick is chilling the buttercream for a few minutes before piping. If you want the color to be even brighter, you can simmer the raspberry puree a little longer before using it. That reduces it slightly and concentrates both the flavor and the natural pink color. So you usually don't need any food coloring at all. And if I'm piping roses or tall cupcake swirls, I like to chill the buttercream for about 10 minutes first. It holds its shape much better, especially if the kitchen is warm. One last little trick I use when filling a piping bag. I fold the top of the bag over my hand first. It keeps the edges clean and stops the buttercream from getting smeared all over the outside of the bag. It's a tiny thing, but it saves a lot of sticky fingers later. If you're not using the buttercream right away, I usually store it in the refrigerator. I just place it in an airtight container and keep it chilled until I need it. When I'm ready to use it again, I let it sit on the counter for about 20 to 30 minutes. So it softens a little. Then I give it a quick mix with the mixer and it comes right back to that fluffy texture. You can also freeze this buttercream if you want to save it longer. I like to spoon it into a Ziploc bag, press out as much air as possible, and then label the bag with a Sharpie with the date and what's inside. It keeps really well in the freezer for about 2 to 3 months. When you're ready to use it, just thaw it in the refrigerator overnight. Then let it come to room temperature and whip it again for a minute or two until it's smooth and fluffy. And that's it. Homemade raspberry buttercream. It's bright, fresh, naturally flavored, and one of my favorite frostings when I want something that feels a little special but still simple to make. And honestly, once you taste buttercream made with real fruit like this, it's hard to go back to artificial flavors. Thanks for hanging out with me for a few minutes, and I'll see you in the next recipe.